Hi, welcome to a new episode of the Mika DNR's See Beyond show. Today featuring Doron Meyerstorff from StoreDot. Let the battery talks begin.
So what a wonderful day, and it's not just because the sun is shining. I think I see it on your side, but also here in Oslo in Norway. But actually, we're doing a new episode of the See Beyond show. And today, I think I have a very exciting company and exciting person with me. And there's so much news around your company, which we'll talk about very soon. That, I can hardly keep track of all the things that are happening, like announcement with the cooperation with Volvo Cars today. And
we had
etc.
all last month,
Yeah, so welcome, Doron Meyerstorff and StoreDot to the show. So
very exciting to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we were in contact for quite a while here, so I'm happy we can do this now, because now I understand why you kind of had to postpone. There's so much going on. But for the pleasure of the audience, could you please introduce yourself and your company?
Sure. So I'm Doron Meyerstorff, CEO and co-founder of a startup in Israel called StoreDot. We are 120 people here. 35 of them are PhDs in different areas of chemistry, material science, electrochemistry, battery innovation. And we are 10 years old. We've raised to date over 200 million from 6 or 7 strategic investors. And we are going to produce the first ever 5-minute fully charging battery for electric vehicles in the next few years. So this is very exciting.
Wow. I mean, of course, I understand that companies are just crowding to when you say 5 minutes charging.
Right.
Because that is something of the clue here, because, I mean, of course, we've seen the capacities going up, so you can do a supercharging, quick charging, but still, I think there's a hurdle from users. But I have to stand so long for waiting for charging. Does it work? How does it work? Etc.
Yeah, so it's the term is range anxiety. People are worried, and some people add the charging anxiety. You're worried that either you're going to get stuck on the highway because there's not enough range, or you get to the charging station and then, there's a long line ahead of you, or you need to spend just 2 hours charging. And that is something that this alone prevents people from buying an electric vehicle. So this is the number one barrier for the adoption of electric vehicles. And what we are here to solve as a startup, but with a number of good high caliber partners, is the chemistry of the battery, which is the missing piece. Because once you have a battery, a lithium-ion battery that can fully charge in minutes, then the whole anxiety goes away. And this is something that was considered impossible to do just until a few years ago, when we started demonstrating that it is possible to take a lithium-ion battery, change some of its materials, and allow it to charge very fast. Yeah. So this is the real breakthrough here.
So here lies the technology uniqueness. I mean, is it anything you can possibly share about the secret source? Source with StoreDot.
Yeah. We are sharing it with the world. We are building on the innovation of the lithium-ion battery. The Nobel Prize in 2019 by 3 guys, Goodenough, it's a name that you never forget, Professor Goodenough and 2 of his colleagues, right? So the innovation there is amazing. It's the ability to take the ions of the lithium and store them inside an active material. Typically, it's graphite. Yeah. But with graphite, it's carbon, and it has high resistance, and it's very difficult to move the ions fast into the material because of the structure, the crystalline structure of the carbon and the graphite. So what StoreDot is doing is replacing this active material of graphite with a different material that is a cousin of carbon, and it is silicon. But this is not silicon as we know it, let's say, with the chip industry. It's not wafers of silicon. This is actually nanopowder. These are nanomaterials that we grind to very, very small particle size. We're talking about, let's say, 20, 30, 40 nanometers, very, very tiny. And these elements enlarge the surface area of the overall active material. So when the ions are trying to come in, they have enough room, enough space to basically be stored in the material. This is all called the anode. This is the negative side of the battery, because when you charge, all these ions are being moved into the anode active material. So most of the innovation is how to design a battery that can work with the silicon, because it's not just plug and play, you replace one material with another, it's a whole system. You need to change the positive side, which is the cathode. You need to change the electrolyte. You need to change the way that you operate the battery. But in an essence, this is, you can, in a simplified way, this is a normal battery, but it has silicon instead of graphite.
Yeah. Very interesting. And, you know, I've commercialized a lot of technologies and products myself and done a lot of, you know, testing, etc. So I'm kind of, what's the effort to kind of get something like that to a prototype level? I mean, how much testing have you done? And
So,
what type of testing yourself?
Right. So this is actually, it did take us almost a decade of very intense research. And think about it, when we said 35 PhDs, these are like 2 faculties of a university, let's say, like the MIT, right? So, and they're all doing the same research. They all have one thesis, one research that they need to solve. And this is how to take these ions and put them into the active material in a very fast manner, in a safe way, also that it will be cost effective, right? Because we need to compete with traditional batteries. And that we will also, it's one of the design parameters, is that we will use the processes and the equipment and the factories the same way that there are today. No changes to because the infrastructure of battery production is already there. I mean, just now Tesla opened this, amazing 100 gigawatt factory in Texas. This is like 3x on the Nevada facility, right? So these are enormous investments in the tens of billions all over the world. We are leveraging these investments. So we are using the equipment as is, and we produce at scale already, by the way, through our joint venture in China with EV Energy. We are producing on these lines, production lines, those batteries without any changes.
Okay, wow. So of course, first of all, when you're a startup, I mean, like you say, more than a decade of let's say, developing, and that of course includes trial and error. And there, in that phase, sure, there can be learnings from mistakes. Then you say that you have raised more than 200 million, is it dollars or euros in funding? Yeah. And now you're scaling up when actually failure is not an option anymore. So,
yeah. So you're right, because up until recently, the failure was I'd say, the normal operation, because, you know, you're searching for something that is new, something that was considered impossible to do. So by definition, 99% of the tests that you will do will end up with a failure, because if the solution was just out there, you know, it wouldn't have been considered impossible to do. And somebody else, like from the big guys, let's say LG Chem or CATL or SK Innovation, all these battery makers, they would have already found the solution, because everybody wants to do faster charging. It has been on everybody's radar for a very long time. But, you know, we took our mission to focus only on that. Because, you know, if you are trying also to improve the energy density, and also to improve the recyclability, and also to improve the lifetime, you cannot, you know, really make a leap forward in the ability of fast charging. And we wanted to move from hours to minutes. So this is a very major and critical task. So you asked before about, you know, the scale of experiments. We have about 2,000 experiments at any given time. And all these are being uploaded to the cloud, the data every second of a cycling of a battery. We record the, you know, the temperature, the current, the swelling, the voltage, all the parameters of the battery every second. Each of these tests is sending the data to the cloud. By the way, from here in Israel, also in China, same setup. And you have in a Google Cloud, you have terabytes and terabytes of data.
Yes.
Now, no human can actually look at this data and say, you know, this battery is better than that battery. And this is why we have a team of data scientists that are actually sifting the data, and through machine learning, are trying to find those batteries that perform the best.
Yeah.
And try to correlate this performance to something in the formulation. Now, it can be the speed of mixing of the material, it can be the order of mixing, it can be the rest time between the steps, it can be, you know, even which technician actually made the battery to work. So many parameters, things that, you know, we don't know what we don't know, right? We don't know what is happening. So only a machine that looks at this terabyte of data through data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence tools can actually start pointing you in the right vector, in the right direction. And this is what we've been building over the years, is this methodology and capability to sift the information from the vast amount of experiments and to narrow it down to those batteries that would eventually be safe enough and perform the best in the vehicle.
Understand. So, and you as, let's say, an entrepreneur, and I mean, you need to have persistence, passion, and let's say, if we talk about the past now, I mean, when did you feel that there was actually that major breakthrough with the technology? That, wow, this was the revelation. And secondly, also, I'll ask you, was it any time you felt like, oh no, this is not going to work, you know, if you understand? Because yeah.
So this is actually a very schizophrenic, I would say, scenario, because from day one, it was a big wow. We kind of tested materials in a very wide range of materials, and I saw in the lab some of the batteries that we actually charged in 30 seconds. And I'm talking like 9 years ago. So I knew, and I knew it also from previous life when I was, you know, managing this solid state drive at SanDisk, for example. You know, when we moved from a rotating hard drive in the computer to something that we all have in our laptops today, which is a solid state drive, an SSD, this was my product with a team that was both in Israel and in the US. And when I saw it in the lab that it can actually work faster and better than a rotating drive, it took us about 5-6 years until we actually introduced it into a commercial product. So I knew once I saw something in the lab that solves a major problem and it's working in the lab, I knew it's possible and I knew it would happen. Now, I didn't know if we will make it happen or somebody else will make it happen, but I knew it will happen. So this gave me the confidence to keep going at it and, you know, facing many investors and partners and be confident in the fact that, yes, it's going to happen eventually. We just need sufficient time in order to conduct this research. Now, of course, like you say, there are times, because it's 99% failure, there are times that there's failure and failure and failure 99 times, and you kind of lose sleep over it, right? But, you know, if you have the vision, if you believe and you have this light that I remembered from day one in the lab that I saw that it's working, I said, we will find a way to make it work at scale, at cost, safely. And this is what we are now getting very close to bringing it to fruition. So very exciting process here.
Yeah. Doron, I hope you sleep well these nights at least then.
Tonight I'll sleep
it
well
that way.
because I did sleep several nights, but tonight I'll sleep well.
But okay, so you mentioned investors and your fundraising, which has been phenomenal in that sense. So what did you find like the most challenging part with all the fundraising? Because as a CEO, you have to be in front of various investors and pitching, and they go into due diligence, etc. But what was the major challenge from your perspective?
I think the major challenge is is the ability to be flexible and work with a very wide range of investors. Because you know, at the beginning, frankly, I did not think that the vehicle will be our first implementation. I thought about smartphones, I thought about power tools, toys, drones. You know, so only recently we started demonstrating a scooter, and now we are working on a four-wheeler demonstration. And frankly, we didn't bring any of the markets to be a commercial product, because I believe that the large market and where we can make the biggest impact is the electric vehicle, where it's the biggest revolution. Now, if you have investors that are interested in, let's say, a smartphone, or they're interested in making some, you know, a quick introduction to the market because this is their style, this is very different than working, let's say, with Daimler or with Volvo or with you know, VinFast or these other companies that are thinking long term, and they understand that there needs to be a lot of investment before you take a product like this to the market. So I think when you ask me where's the difficulty is that you need to work with all of them concurrently, and all of them are sitting on your board, and all of them have their own desires, right? So you need to make everybody happy, and that's almost an impossible task. So this is where I find myself a lot of time trying to bridge the short-term and the long-term kind of ambitions of the company.
Oh, exciting. Of course, when you say that, let's say we live in times with so much disruption and new technology, innovation, and you coming there and working also with traditional OEMs, like you mentioned, Daimler, Volvo, and VinFast, again, a new player. So, but do you find, is it easy with the acceptance with the traditional corporates and OEMs or was there particular hurdles in accepting or getting them on board here?
So I think, you know, all large OEMs are now going through some, I'd say, major transitions into electrification. And this means changing the teams, changing management, changing strategy, reallocating resources of investment, resources of R&D teams, factories, new factories for batteries. So they are in a constant transition. So finding a champion and finding a team that will go with you, you know, over the years is a difficult thing with a traditional EV OEM. But the newcomers, such as VinFast or Ola, and there are a few others that we've been working with, they are much faster. They don't have time, and they are like you. They are a startup. They are trying to make things happen. So again, this is a challenge because, you know, you need the brand names in order to get the credibility, do the right testing, bring a very solid product. But you also need the the newcomers, companies to take it to market faster. So this is why we have already 6, 7, or even 8 now strategic investors that are trying to help us with the time to market.
Yeah, that's great. And time to market is, of course, of the essence because scaling up, there's competition, and you want to kind of show the growth.
You should know the biggest enemy of any technology startup is time. Yeah. Because every month you burn money, right? Yes. If you burn money and it doesn't get you closer to the end game, which is the commercialization, then eventually you know, you're going to run out of cash and you'll be in big trouble. So the focus should be on, you know, time to market, and also some people add the time to money, right? Because I can be in the market, but until I see some really serious revenue, can take even several years later, because it takes time to scale up a new vehicle, a new platform. So we are already working on the next platform. Let's say 2024, 2025 platforms are already in the design, right? Those are the models that we should have our batteries designed into.
Oh, yes. And like you say, it takes time too, because this is not just software development. I mean, when you have to build infrastructure, plans, facilities, and it has to match with
supply chain.
Exactly. So many issues here. So, of course, you're in a phase, very serious phase. Like I said, that failure is not an option, but you have to deliver now on your promises. I mean, how do you see that? What are the main challenges in this, let's say, commercialization?
Yes. So there are two challenges. One is that you need to find a good manufacturing partner. And we have found one actually first in China, with all the complexity of working with China, but with EV Energy, they've been a good joint venture over the years, and they also invested now in StoreDot as well. So this is very important. This is challenge number one. We are working on additional ones in Europe, and one hint is we have the joint venture between Volvo and Northvolt, right? So obviously this is a good direction, but we are working on others. Another one in the US, another one in Vietnam, another one in India. So obviously we are trying to get closer to where the vehicle is being produced in terms of the battery production. And challenge number two that I already mentioned is the supply chain, because some of the materials, let's say we mentioned silicon, but there are some other materials, are relatively new to the battery industry, especially battery grade nanosilicon at scale, at volume, is something that is challenging, because it just wasn't done before. It's not that it's not possible, but you need to make it very cost effective. And we can't pay for the silicon more than they used to pay for graphite. And this takes time, because it's all about scale. Now, this is a chicken and the egg. Until you produce, you don't have scale. But if you have scale, you don't need StoreDot. So, it's a...
Very, but hey, I don't know if you saw that report, but I read that in a major media outlet about, it was the CEO of Rivian, RJ Scaringe.
Yes.
And he was saying that actually the EV boom might be up for a big challenge in terms of battery supplies. And he says also that Rivian, a newcomer, struggles with supplies, their supply chain, because, well, the traditional suppliers, well, do they bet on Rivian as a newcomer, or do they rather supply the traditional ones? So how do you see this from your side?
I mean, here we can all learn from, Elon Musk and what Tesla has been doing from day one. And they became very strong on the vertical integration from the mining of the material, including lithium, by the way, including silicon, because they are also using silicon, but they use it in a different way. They use it to increase the range, the energy density. We use it for fast charging, but still Tesla is using silicon as well. So they are building the supply chain of silicon. Also, the nickel, the cobalt, the manganese, all these are elements that if you don't have strategic supply, then you are going to run very quickly into trouble. And, Rivian should probably start doing the same and look deeper into the supply chain in order to ensure the continuous flow of materials into the factories. Otherwise, yes, I agree with him. It's going to be a major hurdle to scale up the volume of batteries. We need roughly, and this I heard Elon say years ago, but it's absolutely true. We need 100 gigafactories, 100. There are only a few that are being built. So definitely there's a lot to be done in order to sustain the transition to electrification.
And Doron, I think it's back to Mr. Henry Ford's principles when he built up Ford, that you actually have to have control of the vertical supply chain.
Exactly.
It has been accentuated, I think, with this transition too, because many of the traditional OEMs, out, or let's say they put lot of components were outsourced or manufacturing, not having that control of the supply chain. Now it's coming back. I see that with many players.
Exactly. And when you think about the components of the vehicle, most of them are changing, but the one that didn't exist before was the battery. And the battery is, you know, between a third and half the cost of the vehicle. So if you don't control the supply chain of the battery, then half of the vehicle is like up in the air, right? So, you know, a vehicle today is not what it used to be. You know, in a combustion engine, you have like, I think 1,800 parts, moving parts. In an electric engine, you have 20, right? So it's a very different attitude to how you're going to manage your production. And batteries are definitely a key element. It's basically the battery, it's the electric engine, and it's the software. That's all the vehicle. Yeah. All the rest is decoration, right? So if you don't control these three elements, and mostly the battery, then you're going to run very quickly into production issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So that is, as I see it, also very critical for the future and the expansion. And if you look at the user side, I mean, we were into this range anxiety. I mean, I live in Norway. We have a huge adoption on EVs. I mean, it's very natural, and we have a good charging infrastructure. It's working very well.
Norway is actually, you know, it's the lighthouse for all the world to see how a transition to electrification needs to happen, because you know, it's being pushed from the government, it's being pushed with the infrastructure, it's being pushed with the subsidies, and it can happen overnight. But you know, most of the world is still, you know, just in shock of what needs to happen in order to make this transition. You know. So.
Yeah, sure. Meaning, I mean, I do drive. I have 2 EVs, battery electric vehicles, and my first one I have had since 2013. I mean, those days, I mean, it was still early phase and not very common. Okay, in the capital city Oslo, you see a lot of them, and now it has become a boom as such. But I think with the user experience, very much relates to actually what you're working on. Is this the fast charging? Because many times you see queues on the charging stations. I don't know how the charging infrastructure looks like in Israel, for instance, at this point in time, but
very weak.
Very weak. Okay.
We are behind. We are very good in you know, conceptualizing the ideas, but when it comes to the actual implementation, we still need to go a long way.
Yeah. But because I think, let's say, also the traditional OEMs maybe have missed this a bit earlier on, that it's the product is the car, but actually I said the whole user experience goes beyond that. Exactly. And I must say, I've been also in Norway frustrated early on with the charging stations, different apps, ways of paying, etc. The time it takes, but it has become quite good. But I think that needs to be taken care of. It's essential for the adoption.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So also, as we talk about Norway, we in Oslo this summer in is it June? There's the EVS 35. Have you considered taking part of that?
Yes, or absolutely. Most likely we will be there. Yeah.
That's good, because then we can meet in person. Actually,
I'll buy you lunch for sure.
Yeah, we'll do something together there. That sounds good. So the next steps for StoreDot, Dora. What's kind of the next major milestone?
So exactly what you said. We need now to deliver on the technology, and we move from an R&D phase to a commercial phase. So there's a lot of work on the supply chain. We're going to announce very soon a new VP of supply chain and operations that would look at this global challenge of production in several locations. So definitely just taking the product to market is an execution challenge. It has also risks because you know, the globalization is not the same way that we knew how it was just even 2 years ago, right? Before, let's say, before COVID, before the war in Ukraine, before the tensions between US and China. All these things are actually making the life very hard for a startup to take a new product to market. And this is why all these big names like Volvo is actually a great support in taking this product to market.
Wonderful, and I hope you get a good support there and constructive way of building the synergies, of course. And then I'm thinking that when you're now growing, and like you said, you have 120 employees plus minus and 35 PhDs. How do you see this on, let's say, recruiting? I mean, how do you see that as a bottleneck with the talents, or do you think it's easy to get more people?
So I already felt it about a year ago that I started kind of understanding that we totally exhausted the talent pool in Israel. And we opened an R&D center in California, actually, and our chief scientist is actually a Korean guy, Dr. David Lee. So he's heading the office in California, and we are recruiting, you know, from MIT, from Stanford, from Berkeley, people that actually can bring new, fresh ideas and talent into the effort, because you know, just in Israel is very small. And I think like almost any PhD that finished, chemical engineering or electrochemistry, they're all working for us. So, or they stayed at university and they're also working with us on some collaboration.
Wow.
So this is really, and also we have, for example, some of our advisory board. So, for example, Professor Doron Orbach, who is the head of the Global Electrochemistry Society, he's on our advisory board. So in terms of using the talent pool in Israel and the relationship with the universities, I think we kind of exhausted it. But, you know, we are also, like we said, we are moving into a more execution phase. And this is more like a global talent that we can actually tap into in different. So we are hiring now a person in Germany, a few people in China, a few people in Vietnam, a few people in India. So it's basically, it's going to be more like a global effort right now.
Okay, so do you, from your point of view then, Doron, do you see that like future work? I mean, can you really be anywhere working? And or do you need to have a certain base or?
So definitely, you know, the lab in Israel, and when you come to Israel, you have to come and see the lab, because what I hear, and I wouldn't have said it if you know, I didn't hear it from Volvo and from others. This is the best. Daimler also said it. This is the best lab in the world for research of batteries. Like the first 25 million that I got as funding 7 years ago went into the lab. So we are looking at like 2,000 square meters of lab research into and the pilot line of production of next generation batteries. I mean, each company that comes and said, "Wow, we wish we had such a lab," and we are a startup, you know, 100 people. So this was really amazing. So, but I had this notion that it was very strong feeling that, you know, if I have all these people that are so talented, if we don't give them the best lab, the best equipment, the best infrastructure to create the innovation, then we'll be very limited in what we can do. And this actually proved to be right, even though it's a huge risk. If you raise, let's say, 30 million, and you take 25 and you put it in a lab, you have very short time to prove that this lab is worth anything, right? So this was, it was risky, but I did feel that this is the right thing to do. And for example, the investment from BP, we didn't mention them, British Petroleum. Yeah. They invested 20 million. And the reason the guy that was in charge on the investment, he told me, the minute I saw the lab, I knew that we are going to invest, because I know how to recognize a good lab when I see one. This was his sentence. So it actually had a lot of dividends, taking all the money and putting it in a lab.
It's a selling argument, an investor argument, to see that you have top-notch
it's
facilities.
Both. It's the investor argument, and it's also the innovation argument.
Of course.
Because it's a chicken and egg kind of thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. So in terms of, I'm going to round off this. I mean, asking you, let's say with your expansion plans now, I mean, do you foresee to do some additional funding rounds? Or,
so,
I mean,
you know, really to scale production, you need a lot of cash.
Yeah.
Why? Because we are going to go into several years of over demand for batteries. So when you approach a factory and you ask them to stop a production line, which is a cash cow, you want them, no, stop, and now start producing StoreDot battery. Now it takes about a year to really stabilize a new line. So just think about the money that they're going to lose because they are introducing now StoreDot technology, which is a risk because the supply chain is not there, the orders are not there, you don't know if it's safe enough, you don't know if it's cheap enough. So, you know, it's actually a huge challenge. So I need cash in order to convince factories that they would stop a production line, and I call it a captive capacity, and would allow this capacity to be captive for StoreDot. So, you know, let's say $100 million, here, take a cash, $100 million, and now I want all this line to be only a StoreDot line now for 3 years. Okay, so that's why I need big money. And so we are looking at you know, a round of maybe 300-400 million in the next let's say 2 years or so.
Okay, well, that's for any interested investors, of course, and look at StoreDot and connect with Doron if you're interested to kind of hear more about this story as such. So things take time. I also looked at the report. They had compiled data on startups that the major value comes after 10 years. It's not the first 10 years. It's after that. So I think you have a very exciting decade coming up here.
Well, I hope I still have some hair left by the time we are done with this.
Well, you're still pretty, yeah,
I have
still looking pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, but you should have seen me 10 years ago. I really had nice hair.
Okay. Oh, it's getting a bit worrying here.
It's very hard work, but it's also very rewarding because we do feel that we bring something that can make an impact on society with, you know, especially with global warming and the whole transition to zero emission electrification vehicles.
Super important, and everyone has to make an effort there.
Absolutely.
On that side. So thank you very much, Doron. This was extremely good, and I'm impressed with your performance, what's going on, etc. So we'll stay tuned and meet in person, I hope, then for EVS 35 in Oslo.
Absolutely, and you should also plan a trip to Israel.
I will, definitely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.